G'day and welcome to another episode of Spectrum Uncensored. Today I have with me Michael from North Brisbane. How are you?
Not too bad, Jamie. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah,
How
thank you
you
for
going?
coming along. So we were just going to talk a little bit about what you've been diagnosed with and I guess what you do with yourself on a regular basis.
Yeah. Well, I suppose for me, I was diagnosed with inattentive ADHD probably a little over 2 years ago now. Um, and I suppose getting there for me was a bit of a rough journey as far as, at least for me anyway, as far as kind of what happened. But uh, definitely worthwhile finding out about because you kind of then start looking backwards at things like that and going, okay, so that makes a lot more sense now. So,
Yep, I definitely get that.
um,
Yeah. Same with me for
yeah,
when I was diagnosed. Yeah.
yeah. Um, so, like, I think for me, when I kind of when we first started looking at it, was actually my wife who kind of was giving me very much regular nudges of doing something about it, find out, because obviously, the trail of breadcrumbs you leave behind you without actually knowing what it is tends to get extensive and starts impacting things. And that was around about probably about a year after COVID started, and about 2 years after my daughter was born, that kind of started like talking to people, asking serious questions. And even then, it took probably what, two or three professionals to go to before one of them went, okay, look, that sounds like this, but you'll need to speak to somebody else because that's not something I specialise in. But somebody else will be able to help. And then we got the diagnosis. It was like, okay, yep, that makes a lot more sense. Yeah. So I know it was a difficult process to go through because part of finding out it's a possibility is then going, okay, so what does that actually mean? What is a part of that? You know, I'm not an organised person. I have to work very hard at being organised, and even then, I probably still miss the boat. um, uh, Even the idea of people just saying, just write a list. It's great if you can remember the list, take it with you, and you remember to use it. So um, I discovered kind of as we're going along now, I started learning more about ADHD. I started reading about it. Read a few different books that had seemed to have quite a lot of people reading them and seemed to be thought of reasonably well to start with. Um, and listened to some audiobooks when I was doing other things, just because I didn't always have time to kind of sit down and read a book. But it ticked so many boxes. Like, not I don't manage time well. At least I was substantially worse at it. Uh, there's always the cliche thing of going to the kitchen to make a coffee and making three trips to the fridge because you've got something else when you're there, and then come back and you're standing in front of your coffee with like tomato sauce or something like that. Um, but there's other things as well because I found that because I didn't know what was happening, I lacked perspective on what it was doing around me as well. And that frustrates other people that you live with or related to or work with as well, because you often end up leaving mess that either they have to try and compensate for, or you know, it frustrates them because the lack of being able to keep track of time means either late to appointments or things like that.
Yeah, and I think too that it's kind of the stresses that get you to a point where you're like, I need to have this checked because, like as you say, you've now got a daughter, so you've got that extra responsibility, and that does put stress on you, whether you care to admit it or not, and it tends
Yeah,
to like flare up a lot of the symptoms. I know I found that with me when I didn't really, I always knew I was different, but it wasn't until I had my son that the whole kind of world changed,
yeah,
and it was very stressful because all of a sudden you've got this little human that depends on you, and you thought you had your stuff together, and then you realize, no, I don't. I don't at all.
yeah. Yeah, hang on a minute. My version of together is not the same as what would be considered either normal or even anywhere near that. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. And
Um,
my husband's he's autistic and ADD, and
Yeah.
that was quite a journey as well. And it started out very similar. I kept bugging him, going, "There's something not right," and he's got things like Parkinson's in his family, so he was very forgetful and things like that. And I was
Yeah.
always very frustrated with it, and I just thought, that there must be something going on. You got to get checked, and it took years for them to pinpoint it. They went from ADHD to bipolar, and then finally settled with ADD.
Yeah.
So it can be quite a an extensive journey. It's not necessarily cut
A
and
quick
dry.
one.
And
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, for me, I'm 80. Sorry, I'm ADHD and autistic,
Yeah.
and I had a lot of trauma as a child. So for me, I was trying to work out, is it trauma that's causing me to be like this, or is it something more, or is it both? Like it was trying to kind of work out why we do what we do. And you become a lot more self-accepting as well. And then the people around you, they just begin to understand a little bit better that, like, okay, you actually can't control that, and you need measures in place to be able to do those things.
Yeah. I think one of the other things that happens sometimes too is if, like, for me, that COVID, my daughter being born and everything, because like I went from working in contact with people in an office, and also it was actually the trip to the office because you'd listen to music on the way, and you'd have some kind of activity that would kind of, I don't know, settle you, wake you up, or at least prepare you for the day without it being kind of like rolling down a hill at speed. Which
Yep.
is when COVID hit, then there was, you'd wake up, you'd have to get the baby all taken care of, you'd be organising food, stuff like this, trying to do housework, and then literally running from one room to another to start work. And
Yep.
then your break comes along and you've got to get her to sleep. So you have to do a quick 15-minute trip around the block to get her to sleep and then put her down. And then 6 months into that, she just says, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm not taking that nap anymore, Dad, on one day. And then she drew a line in the sand and didn't do it again. So I had no
Yep.
warning it was coming. um,
And that's hard
so,
because we're so routine driven and things like that. And we
yeah,
get in a routine, and it's like, oh, as soon as it changes, and with a baby, it's so unpredictable, and
yeah,
it's just not something that is easily dealt with for us. So it's yeah, kids definitely throw a spanner in the works, and you can never really be 100% settled because, as I say, it's constantly changing with children as they grow. So
yeah,
it's definitely, I think, has been my biggest challenge. Yeah, since finding
yeah.
out.
So I know it was all like before I got the diagnosis, whenever we went anywhere with a little one, I would pack the bag to the point where it was too heavy to carry for anyone else because I've got, wipes, half a dozen changes of clothes and all this other stuff. And then there's other stuff put in the car.
You've gone like the full
Um,
MacGyver.
yeah,
Something for everything.
I've the full MacGyver. And um, so that would be my way of trying to make sure I haven't forgotten anything. I pack so much stuff, it looks like we're going somewhere for the weekend when we're going down to Kmart or something.
Yep.
Um, so knowing now that I've got some issues around planning, prioritization, stuff like that, I can do some things to try and organise that, like my daughter's school stuff. I set up a separate email account so all the school related stuff or any medical stuff all goes through to that account. It doesn't go into my email I've had for 20 years, which is now well past the point where I can clean out the email. So
Relatable. I've got a few of
yeah,
those.
yeah. So I can try and do little things like that. And with things like activities on the weekend, I'll have, one bag that all of this activity stuff goes in and another one. So that, in the event that either I've got lost track of time or got stuck on something, it's all organised and ready to go. So I can just pick it up and go to the door. It's a shorter list of things that I need to get. But without that hindsight, you you sit looking and go, okay, why do I only have 15 minutes left? I've got 20 minutes for the stuff that you've got no idea where the time's gone. You have no idea why the time has gone.
Yep.
And your perspective, or at least for me, I felt that my perspective on what I've been doing is normal. Why am I so short of time, or what am I missing? I don't understand, and it's really frustrating
I
for
mean, it's
everyone
your
else, but
normal.
also,
It's your normal, but
yeah, yeah, exactly.
yeah.
But like I couldn't understand why there were problems. I couldn't, and for me also, I not that great at picking up some of the social cues and stuff like that. So for me, it was also a case of, okay, why is this now a problem? I don't understand what happened.
I
Um,
I always kind of, I don't know if it's the same for you, but when I'm in
mm,
hyper focus mode, it's almost like the time actually slows down, but it obviously isn't. But
yeah,
for me, it feels almost like time has slowed down because I'm calm in that hyper focus kind of situation. And then, of course, when you kind of spring out of that and back into reality, that's when you realize, no, time didn't slow down. It's now been 6 hours and the sun's going down, kind of thing. So I guess that's the way I would describe it. Is it feels like your time almost slows down when you're in that zone.
it 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 does. It's obviously still barreling away in the background, but for you, you just kind of it's kind of one step after another. You're knocking things over, which for ADHD is great because that's you've got a win, you've got some dopamine, and it's a snowball effect. But then you're like, what do you mean everyone went to bed an hour ago?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think at one stage I was doing some study on a uni assignment probably about a year and a half ago now, and I was I was actually studying a little bit of programming stuff, and for me, I actually found it quite interesting. So I hadn't touched it before, but I got stuck into it, and I was at it for hours, and I had no idea how much time had passed. And I got everything I needed to do knocked over, which was absolutely great. But then there's like 2/3 of the day is gone,
Yep.
um, and I'm
Everyone's
sitting
grumpy
thinking,
because you've been missing in action.
well, they knew I was going to be missing, but I was hoping I'd surface at some point through it.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yep.
So, but yeah, it was just, and for me, it was weird because I'd never really been able to kind of focus on anything that long. Um, well, look, some things, yes, but not for like length of that time. Computer games, sure, no problems. But I mean,
Yep.
that's not unusual. But yeah, so it was definitely a learning experience. Um, the other aspect of it too, which I suppose requires some adjusters when you first find out, you've got to deal with the kind of baggage of going, okay, well, now what? And then all the frustration or baggage you got from growing up and going through life with it as well. Um, and I'm sure there's probably some people out there who feel it too, where especially people who've gone through school, and I think the old style report cards of going, would do better if applied self and stuff like that.
Yep. If they could
Yeah,
just be focused,
if they could just be
sit
focused,
still.
yeah, if they could just be focused, they would be happier too. but
Yeah. Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
like going through high school, I did excellent at science. I was great at science. I think I got a VHA in year 10 for science, and I still passed it in senior, even though I did very little of the actual work as far as assignment work goes. Um, but it was like chalk and cheese when you compare it to something like what I did in English,
Hmm.
because the English assignments tend to be a lot more subjective. There's less structure, and the content just wasn't anywhere near as interesting. Um, but yeah,
Yeah. I
so
mean,
that
I
was
found through high school I was very similar. If I wasn't interested in it, I failed at it. I
yeah,
had to be. I was all in or nothing, and I was the opposite to you. I loved English, so I excelled in that. I was A's everywhere. Math, no good.
yeah,
Science, I passed, but when I started doing things like biology and physics, I realized it was just another lesson of math, and it was like, nope, not doing that. So I just shut down,
yeah,
and that was when I would, yeah, not succeed very much. So I was academic in areas that interested me, but I did a second language and I got A's in that, but yeah, I just couldn't maths and science. I just couldn't quite throw myself into, I suppose. But everyone has their interests, and I still to this day like to write and things like that.
yeah.
So I guess that's I was always just more interested in English and writing and things like that. But it's funny, yeah, how we if we'd known what we know now back then, it would just made things a whole lot easier.
Absolutely. And I know I frustrated my poor English teacher because I had her for both English and science. And
Yeah,
she had me flunking on one side and top of the class and the other and could not work out what was going on.
yeah. Well,
Um,
nobody could, so
no, yeah, exactly. So um, I think though yeah, like in hindsight, it would be great to know those things and actually have had different opportunities than what you have. But the other thing is too is like, I mean, I've daughter now, I'm able to actually do something of my own, and I wouldn't necessarily have those opportunities if I hadn't gone that road. It may have turned out different. So
Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
definitely not an easy experience, and I know there's people out there who will definitely have had worse ones as well. But yeah, I think
I mean, our
sometimes
trauma
it,
builds character to some extent, I
yeah,
suppose, in a way.
yeah. Because I know in high school I was always the socially awkward person. I hated like standing up in front of class, like did everything I could to avoid it. Um, but then, like years later, I kind of spent a lot of time working on the phones in a variety of different roles as well. And from that side, I then like, kind of, I suppose, refined or fine tuned how I talk to people in those environments as well.
Yeah.
Got a lot better at it. You know, 40 hours a week talking to people, kind of one after another like that, gives you that opportunity to kind of, even if you're bad at it at the start, you can refine if you kind of look at what you do and then kind of fine tune and pay attention and stuff like that. And kind of I discovered that the actual missing link for that whole process wasn't actually the talking, it was the listening,
Yeah.
um, which is one of the hardest things to train people
And I think people talk about masking things all the time. And
in.
I
Yeah,
feel like for us, they make it sound like you've just got like two personalities, but you really, when you're masking for different situations. So you have several masks. And I think
yeah,
that kind of sounds very similar to what you're saying, in that you've refined, in that you've got a mask for that particular set of circumstances. And then you've kind of gone, okay, well, this is my personality, or my demeanor or whatever, or
yeah,
in that certain situation. I mean, we do it in social situations. Our home self is different to our public self and things like that. So it's yeah, it's, as I said before, it's not cut and dry. It's very yeah, erratic kind of
yeah.
thing,
And
chaotic.
and it's kind of strange because you can you sometimes you feel like you can make connections in one environment, but you end up in the other one and you go, okay, so what am I doing here? It's like
Yep.
got no idea. And you know, like unfortunately, like I've got a whole bunch of friends, good friends. They like football. They like sports. I have no idea. I mean, I like playing it. It's fun. Watching it, it would be like watching it will put me to sleep. Um,
Yes. Yep.
so, as a result, they start talking about football, and it may as well be a foreign language because I might know some of the team names, but that's, I couldn't tell you where they were half the time, who's on
Yep.
them, no idea.
Yeah, my husband's
Um,
like that. He's like, you
yeah,
make me talk about more footy than I just like ever thought I would. And he's like, I've had to learn all of it, and it's not something I really want to learn, but I'll do it for you. So it's,
yeah,
yeah, it is. It's funny, isn't it?
it is. And yeah, it's just it's a strange thing because like I know for me, my hobbies have been kind of more or less how I ended up finding my kind of group of people that I fitted with in high school. So things like tabletop gaming, computer games, casual card games and stuff. That was kind of what I got into in high school and have been since then. So that's close to 30 years now.
Yep.
Still doing it when I have time. But like I've met friends who I'm still friends with. I've worked with people and for people from the connections I made there. And then in hindsight, when you look back, you go, okay, so now with a new understanding of kind of what to look for and stuff, that's like, okay, that makes so much more sense. Because like, half or two-thirds of the people I'm working with are likely on the spectrum somewhere or
I
have
was
a
gonna
confirmed
say
diagnosis. So
that was my next question: is do you think
yeah,
like all your friends are on the spectrum? Because I feel like when people throw out, "Oh, I play World of Warcraft and Dungeons and Dragons," I think that should be on the DSM-5 criteria for for autism,
yeah,
because it's very common.
it is, and I think for me, it's been kind of one of the more accepting groups or slash communities because you know people tend to be a little bit eccentric, and you have the
Hmm.
older people who are eccentric and don't. care whether or not they're eccentric. Then you've got the younger people who've got obviously more recent medical knowledge and know there's a diagnosis there, but they don't really care. They kind of fit in with that group.
Yep.
Um, and it's, for me, I think that was um, probably, I think made a massive difference to me in the scheme of things, because once I found that group I fitted with, then, that was great. I had something in common with people. There's, a lot more social opportunities. You'd go to clubs or other stuff like that. I'd even travel with groups of friends to events in other states and stuff like that too. So definitely had lots of fun, made lots of friends doing that type of thing. And yeah, it still has my interest. It just doesn't have as much of my time as it used to.
It's that safety in numbers, I think. Like
Yeah,
you're in a group of people that just get each other, and I think that would even be the case with people that are neurotypical. You're looking for people that are like-minded, and that you feel
yeah,
safe in that environment with those people and supported. So it's no real different in that regard. But yeah, it there tends to be very kind of niche
can be
areas in
gravitate.
which people
Yeah,
gravitate towards. Yeah, yeah. But I do
yeah,
love that. That's I look at things in hindsight. For me, for high school, and I tended to um, hang around with just other people that were just lost souls, and we kind of just became our own little group. But the majority of them were very much like that. It was all into the games and things like that.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, and I'd love to actually see where they are now, because I have a feeling a lot of them would have been diagnosed. But yeah, it's definitely, I find it's empowering to know your diagnosis or your diagnoses, just because you can, the whole knowledge is power thing. You can um, help yourself.
Yeah,
You're not gonna, as I say, there's not a cure. It's not a cure. It's and it's doesn't mean you're any different once you know, but it's just that knowing. It hits differently when you know for sure, because you always suspect. I think deep down you have a feeling.
yeah, yeah. I'm pretty sure for me it was deep down. I know I'm not as organised as other people, and that was always a struggle for me, and other things as well. But it's like I had no idea it was actually a thing, other than just kind of that's how I operated, which didn't really fit a I don't know what kind of a pigeonhole, so to speak.
Yeah.
Um, but it was definitely interesting finding out. Learning about it was a bit of a difficult process, because obviously you read about kind of things and stuff like that, and then you go, well, look, this would have been great to really deal with that, the pain and the frustration you have from that, because it's there. You just don't kind of realize until you actually start looking at it with a probably more of a fine tooth comb. But yeah, it definitely makes a difference, because you can change how you do some things. You can try and structure things differently. Try and replace old habits, which aren't positive ones, with good ones. And you also know that it's not you who's broken. If for some reason one method of doing something doesn't work, you just need to try and find the one that does.
Yeah.
Like pen and paper diary, or writing notes by hand still works better for me than doing it on a computer and then filing it somewhere.
Yep.
Um,
I'm the same.
I've tried apps, I've tried calendar reminders and alarms, and it's just not as effective as having like a visual reminder of it.
Yep.
Um,
I find I can forgive myself as well for my flaws a little bit more so now, in that, like, knowing that I'm wired a certain way and I'm not failing as such. It's just that, I do things differently, as you say.
yeah,
Yeah, it's that, like, self-forgiveness a little bit, because you beat yourself up a lot. You're your own worst critic. So oftentimes it's like, what is wrong with me? Why do I keep doing this? Why can't I do this? And so once you know why you can't, it's a little bit more, it's almost uplifting, I suppose.
yeah. And I think it also does allow you to try and be a bit more aware of some of the social interaction things, um, like I know when I talk to people, I jump topics. That's one of the things that I do, because it's like, oh, while I'm here, I thought of this as well. And it's like, that's okay. Why are we talking about that? Or what's the connection?
Yep.
Um, I've seen people in my family do that, and I've really struggled to keep pace with the conversation. They'll jump between topics and so on. I know I do it, and I also know that when I'm talking with people, I have to be mindful that I don't jump in and interrupt, because there's that,
Yeah.
I've got to share this before I forget it type impulse, and it's like, okay, I've got to just hold on a second. There'll be a spot somewhere.
Yeah, we're all
Um,
the same, I think, with that. And I
yeah,
always say it's the same as like when you go out and you've got to do something and then you remember something else you need to do. And I always just say, I've done like 20 side quests today, but I have not completed the actual quest. That's for another day, obviously.
yeah.
So,
It's it's like helping someone else organise their entire lounge room and then coming back to your desk that looks like a dumpster fire. So it's just like, I can tackle that, which is 5 times the size, but I don't want to touch that desk.
yeah. And I
Um,
just love talking to different people that all have the same diagnoses, but everyone's so different, but there's so many things that are exactly the same. Like everybody has said that stuff
yeah,
in their own way, but it's just, yeah, it makes you realize that there's so many of us. Like it's not, yeah, you're not alone with
e-
your feelings.
exactly, yeah. And I think I was lucky with the group that I kind of fell in with after to school and my hobby and stuff like that, in that they are obviously more accepting of those oddities, partially because they probably have some of them themselves, but they just tend to not really be that judgmental, because it tended to be a bit of a niche group anyway that was always on the fringe of the regular stuff in high school.
Yeah.
So they tended to be, yeah, okay, so maybe a little odd, that's fine, whatever, and then move on. Um, and then everyone would have a kind of a communal laugh about some things when you did something that just didn't make sense.
It's
Um,
weird when it's like, it's literally described as odd, but
yeah,
you fit into it. So it's like, I mean,
exactly.
obviously being odd
It,
means not fitting in, but yeah,
it,
you fit into something odd.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's odd but not unexpected for everyone in the group. So it's, yeah, not in, I suppose in the scheme of things, not that odd.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, so like I got a lot out of those hobbies. Still do. It's but yeah, it's definitely been interesting, and I know it's. I think I was never great at a lot of those organisation things before. I was definitely better, but once kind of COVID started, there was that massive culture shock. We went from having contact with people to having none. So the people that I would catch up with on the weekend didn't see them for months. Might see them via like Discord or something else like video conference or something, but it's not the same.
No.
And you're not seeing people in the office, and you kind of, we didn't leave the house probably the first few months much anyway. Um, so you've got that, the cabin fever, you need to get out of the house, your routine has been destroyed. Those kind of coping mechanisms, whether they were great ones at the time or not, are also out the window as well. And new child, for your first child too, stressful, because you have no idea what you're doing, and you're always worried about what you're doing is the right thing or not, or you know, if they try to eat that piece of furniture or something like that, is it going to be really really bad for them? Yeah, just
It was a double isolation because you're always slightly isolated when you first have a child, and then
yeah,
you had the COVID on top, so you had no choice but to be isolated.
yes, and doing PowerPoint based training via like Microsoft Teams and stuff like that, just was mind numbing. It was so difficult to remain focused because it was so boring. Um, it's not the same as having a person talk to you,
Yeah, yeah,
because you can't all talk at the same time in Microsoft Teams because everyone hears nothing.
yeah.
Yeah,
So, did you start your business? Because we were talking about that just before we
yeah,
started recording. Did you start that? I mean, what is that for a start? But also,
yeah.
did you start that during COVID, or when did you start it?
We started the kind of the setup and registration process with a plan to get the rest of the ball rolling, kind of just as COVID was kind of picking up, because the idea was like, COVID will happen, they'll sort something out, vaccinate people, will be fine. We didn't know it was going to be the train wreck it was, just like everyone. Um, so we had started it then, and just because of everything that happened, it really slowed down our ability to get that stuff done. And obviously, we had my daughter, the remote work, all of that complicated things. But the idea was like we wanted to create a disability service provider. not necessarily, I suppose, unique compared to everyone else in the industry, but we've kind of had a strong focus on making sure that we get the right amount of understanding for the people we work with, because there's a lot of, I still see it now sometimes, that people kind of assume they know what other people want or need. And
Yep.
it doesn't replace a conversation, and it doesn't replace a connection. Um, and it's so impersonal, and that's kind of not what the NDIS is meant to be. It's meant to be personal. It's meant to be kind of connecting with people, and it's meant to be helping them do things. It's not just kind of finding something to bill someone for and then moving on. It's
Yep.
actually going, is this making a difference? Okay, cool. If it's not, what can we do to make it better? And then applying that same approach to the staff. So, okay, how are you going? Do you need help? What do you need to know? Things like that. That type of stuff is important because a lot of places, and not just this industry either, but every industry, they talk about culture and everything like that, but it's not always top down, and it should be, because
Yeah.
otherwise it never gets sustained. As soon as you end up with a couple of layers, then you it doesn't get sustained. It doesn't get passed down to the people below, so that they feel supported and they're able to support other people. So
Yeah, I think like upskilling is a good example, isn't it? That
yeah,
if you don't continue to replenish those skills and improve on those skills, you're not going to be able to do the job, but also it's going to be a whole lot harder for you because you don't know what you're doing.
well, yeah, upskilling is one part of it, but it's also about having an attitude that you bring to what you're doing. Have an attitude of, okay, like, who is this person? What do they want? What do they need? What are their unique challenges? What can we do to help them get what they want or need? Um, and then as we're going along that process, what can we do that does a better job of doing that? And it comes from bringing a learning attitude to it, and that's attempting to understand the other person. You may never understand everything that they've gone through and all of the challenges, but you need to listen. You need to be alert. You need to pay attention for how they're attempting to communicate,
So
whatever
it's that
method that is.
investment. It's like that
Yeah, it
personal
is.
investment into it. It's not just people are a number or you've ticked the box and calling it a day
Exactly.
kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And the same has to come from management. They need to kind of try and apply the same approach to the staff that are working for them and find out, ask questions. What motivates you? What helps you? What's a problem for you? How can we work together to make sure that we both, get something of value out of this, and then the person that we're assisting, gets their value as well. So it's a partnership approach. Um,
Hmm.
and if you just assume that everyone's motivated by this or that, then you're not really kind of investing in them either. So
Yeah, I love that. That's yeah, that sounds like a quite a unique approach, which is really nice because yeah, it's definitely um something that needs to be implemented across the board, especially when it comes to neurodivergence. So
yeah,
it's it's really really cool. And just to finish up, if
yeah,
you had somebody that wasn't diagnosed but thought that maybe they were or they suspected that they were on the spectrum or the like, what would you say to them? What advice would you give to them?
I would say find out first of all, find out what it takes to get diagnosed, because it would be pretty painful to get halfway through the process and not be able to finish it. You can also do a little bit of research via books on kind of what that might mean for you, because if you've been dealing with this through a longer period in your life, you're going to have some trauma from it somewhere. Um, so find out what's involved in getting diagnosed. If you feel that you need to, or if it's worthwhile for you, get diagnosed, so that you have an understanding of kind of what that means for you as far as how it presents. How can you create positive habits, mitigate some of the ones that you've got that you maybe either can't get rid of or are going to require a bit more work, which everyone has some. Um, and then talk to your friends and family, and kind of if you can, try and give them a little bit of a summary of how it presents so they have some understanding, and then be patient with them, because sometimes the issue is, like, obviously our behaviours will impact other people too, um, and sometimes we need to understand that and be a little bit patient with them too.
I love that. That's some sound advice.
Yeah,
Well, thank you very much for coming in today and having a chat with me. I really appreciate taking the time, and it was definitely very lovely to meet you and have a chat.
yeah,
You're
great
actually
to
the
meet you too.
first guy that I've interviewed, so there you
Oh,
go.
right, okay.
Yeah, I don't get many men put their hands up, so it's very refreshing.
It's a little bit, I think, hard for kind of men to deal with this sort of stuff. It wasn't easy for me either, but
Yeah.
it's a difficult process. But yeah, it is.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
hopefully, it'll be a lead by example type situation, and I'll get a few more men having a chat because it is
yeah,
important to keep that conversation going and to
yeah,
include, yeah,
definitely.
men as well.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay. All right.
Thank you so
Thanks very
much for
much,
your
Jamie.
time. Thank
Cheers.
you.
Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.